So first thing I mentioned here is that loud dhikr is generally permissible. Subhanallah, loud zikr, we have been promoting that throughout our life. And those who deny it are Wahhabis, and we know how to deal with them. So we promote loud zikr, zikr bil jahar. We have been given lectures on that. कि zikr bil jahar जायज़ है, मस्जिदों में करना बड़ा सवाब का काम है. और हम करते भी रहे. रमज़ान में तो आप देखते भी रहे मैं खुद zikr bil jahar हर महफिल में तकरीबन zikr होता है. So zikr is something that we promote. We are people of tasawwuf as well. So Qadri, and myself Qadri, but Walid Sahib, mashallah, he is Naqshbandi, like you guys as well. So they all do Khatme Khajgan as well. So zikr is something we promote all the time. But however, it is a masala mentioned in the books of fiqh. I've given some hawalas here, references, Fatawa Radriya Sharif, volume 6, page 234, and masala number 447. You can refer to that, and you will find in there that Allah has mentioned that as long as there is no ostentation, and you're not showing off to anyone, the intention is not to show off. As long as, and also you are intending purely to seek the pleasure of Almighty Allah and the qurb of Almighty Allah, and it must not become a reason for distraction of anybody. Even if someone is not in namaz, I mean, you're doing dhikr on your own, not after namaz. Outside namaz, you had a gathering of dhikr, and somebody comes to read namaz, you must stop there. Because they intend to do namaz masjid now. The masjid is mainly for namaz. So if they want to do namaz and you are doing dhikr, you might be thinking, and rightly so, that you are also doing a good thing, and they are doing their dhikr of Allah in the shape of namaz. So maybe we can continue, but no, if the masala is that you must stop and let them finish namaz first, and then you will continue. So dhikr is not prohibited, permissible and recommended, mustahab, and also is a beautiful thing to do, but only in its limitations in certain parameters. So and must not be harm for somebody who is praying, or must not be harm for anybody who is a patient, for example. If you are in the say proximity of around a patient, and you might think that doing loud zikr might become harmful for them, then you must avoid that. And also, inexpedient, the word inexpedient or impractical from religious point of view, what does that mean? Why did I mention that, and why did Allah Hazrat mention that first? Shari maslahat, he mentioned the word shari maslahat. Shari maslahat ke khilaf now. Maslahat meaning expediency, so it must not be inexpedient. So what does it mean? It basically means that zikr, the main purpose of zikr is to attain the qurb of Allah. Zikr ka maqsad kya hai? Khuda ka qurb hasil karna. Meaning getting the blessing of dhikr, the name of Almighty Allah. You chant that so that your heart will be enlightened with the nur of Allah. And when you do it together, mashallah, in the gathering, as many voices are there, they contribute to the enlightening your heart, subhanAllah. So your heart is more purified when you do dhikr in a gathering. So that's the main purpose. But if the whole purpose is being lost in doing the dhikr, then it will not be appropriate. When you do that dhikr straight after namaz, although it has been practiced for centuries now, at least maybe more than 200 years in subcontinent, and those whoever they migrated from subcontinent, they do that. Nobody else does it. Nowhere else on the earth. Go to Turkey, go to other Arab countries, they all Sunnis, mashallah. They are more proper Sunnis than the Sunnis of the subcontinent. However, they don't do zikr after namaz, straight after. They do zikr on other gatherings. They have separate sittings for zikr. They have hadra, mashallah. You see that on the YouTube as well. They have zikr sittings, but they don't do zikr straight after namaz. Why don't they do that? Because they follow this masala. They follow Shariat. And we somehow have started following our desires. That's the thing. So they must not be impractical and inexpedient, and must not take away from the main purpose of the dhikr. That's the meaning of that. And similarly, the same thing is mentioned in Ruhul Bayan, which is also a great tafsir of Lama Hazrat Ismail Haqqi, and extensively followed by the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, Al-Barilwi as well. So he mentions in Surah Al Imran, which mentioned رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً, in that he mentions that الذِّكْرُ برفع الصوت جائز بل مستحب إذا لم يكن رياء. As long as there is no riya in that, riya which is haram, it's from the major sins. Riya is ostentation. You think that somebody is looking at me, so I should be doing dhikr loudly, mashallah. See? Which might happen, it's a very common thing, occurs when you haven't properly practiced purifying your heart, and you haven't sat down with ulama to learn about the illnesses and evils that caused by the nafs, and you all of a sudden jump into this dhikr. That happens. So often you might be showing off to the people unknowingly. It's not that you intend to do that. You unknowingly, this thought comes into your mind that somebody is watching me, so I should be increasing my dhikr and doing more loudly, more actively, and they might think that mashallah he's a bigger dhakir now, mashallah. This happens. It's not again. It's not pointing out to anybody. It's just a natural thing which could occur to anybody, even the learned ones as well. So therefore, as long as there's no riya, element of ostentation in that, then this will be jais. Again, in all of these things, you will notice that they only mention either mustahab or jais. They haven't mentioned it is necessary, you must do that, or it is wajib, something like that. Jais means another point in this fatwa as well, and other books they mention, when something is mentioned jais or mubah, what does it mean? It means that even if you don't do it, there's no harm in that. It's just jais, equal to do that and also not to do that. Mustahab because you get reward obviously for doing dhikr, or if you don't do it, there's no sin attached to that. Similarly, if you don't do dhikr after namaz, it's just a jais thing. Dhikr itself is just a jais thing. There's no special commandment to stipulate dhikr straight after namaz. There's no commandment on that. It's not mentioned in the Quran, not mentioned in hadith. There's only one hadith of Hazrat Ibn Abbas, which is only khabari wahid and cannot establish any hukm of sharia. So why do we do dhikr of Allah? Not because we are following a specific commandment from Quran or hadith. We do that because the one hadith establishes that, and we think it is mustahab action, something that should be done. But even that hadith I will mention later, that does not establish the dhikr of la ilaha is done. It only says that dhikrullah was done either in the shape of the fourth kalima, la ilaha wahdahu la sharika lahu, or the takbir Allahu Akbar. This is what is mentioned by Abdullah ibn Abbas in the hadith will come later inshallah ta'ala. So purpose is that dhikr is just jais, I'm saying. Jais, not essential, not necessary, not wajib, just jais thing. If you do that, it's a beautiful thing to do, you get reward for that. But it's not something that you must do in all circumstances, even though if you have namazis who have to perform namaz later. So now they mention that it must not be inexpedient or impractical from the religious point of view. That's explained here. That how can it be impractical and inexpedient, not appropriate to do? For example, you have people who join prayer late. And I also mentioned here before I go ahead that when someone is joining prayer late and they have to start up to complete namaz straight away, the rak'ats, they will definitely be distracted and affected by the loud zikr. I get distracted if someone is even talking loud next to me when I'm reading namaz. I find it difficult to concentrate and pronounce the words. So that affects my, even though I'm a hafiz of Quran, I've spent nearly all my life, more than 3/4 of my life reading Quran all the time, alhamdulillah. Even then, I find it difficult to pronounce when someone is talking, or someone has a mobile playing, or a naat playing, or zikr, doing zikr as well. So that's why. It must be the case with everybody else, as I presume, that they must be affected by this loud dhikr that we do straight after namaz, so they find difficult. So that means it makes pronunciation and concentration difficult for them and will be harmful. So in this case, the dhikr becomes wajib. You must stop this dhikr, that becomes wajib. Yani, let alone doing the dhikr which was only a mustahab thing, now it's becoming wajib for you to stop that dhikr. Because, and this masla I will mention in detail here, that in Fatawa Nazmiya Sharif, Al Hazrat was asked about this dhikr, whether we should, is it allowed to do dhikr in that case, or should we stop that? He said, doing dhikr or recitation of Quran, when it causing them to forget what they're reading in namaz, then stopping this dhikr is not only permissible, but also wajib. And the extent of this wajib is such that, as mentioned Hadith Mubarakah, in which our Master of the Universe said, that they've said in Hadith Sharif, Hadith of Muslim Kitab al-Iman, he mentions that man ra'a minkum munkaran falyughayyirhu biyadihi. Whoever sees from you a munkar, yani something that's not stipulated by the Sharia, he must stop that with the hand, with force. Physically, if he has ability, authority, he must stop that straight away. If not, if he cannot do that, then at least he must stop that with the words, and he must say something about it. He should convince people to act against that and to stay away from that. And if he still can't do that, then at least he should dislike that and detest that with the heart. وَذَلِكَ أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ, and that will be the lowest level of Iman. If you want to have the perfect level of Iman, then you can stop that with the hand, or having the equal, also the middle level of the Iman, that then you would stop that. At least you will say something about it. You will tell people not to do that thing. And if you want to simply have the lowest level of Iman and not cause any trouble in the society, in the community, then you can simply dislike that with your heart. And when you dislike something with the heart, that means that you won't do that yourself at least. You will stay away from that yourself. So now, Hazrat is saying that this wajib is such, the wajib that we mentioned is such that we must stop it in all situations. This wujub is mentioned in Hadith Mubarakah, that you must stop it in every situation, and if you can stop it with the hand, you should stop it. If not, then I think you should say something about it, you should dislike that. And also Fatawa Shamia says, talking about the Dhikrullah, Allah says, Fatawa Shamia, which is one of the most authentic books in Fiqh Hanafi nowadays. There have been many authentic books, but now currently the most authentic book, I would say, based upon which even the Muftiyani Kiram, they learn fatwa, how to deliver fatwa. Thus we learn that from Fatawa Shamia. The principles of fatwa are mentioned there. So he is one of the most authentic, therefore, text written by Hazrat Allama Ibn Abidin Shami. He says in Matlab fi Ahkam al-Masjid, the first volume, and page number 434, he mentions that Ajmal ulama salafa wa khalafa, that throughout the history, the predecessors and contemporary ulama, successors, all of them, they have had a consensus upon what? Upon the excellence of dhikr of Almighty Allah. Say Subhanallah.
Subhanallah.
Yani they all knew that zikrullah is a mustahab thing, beautiful thing to do. And also jama'atan fil masajid. When you come together as a group in masjid and do dhikr of Allah, that's a beautiful thing to do. Subhanallah. Yani he mentioned that it's a great thing to do in jama'at, coming to masjid and having special gatherings of zikr, subhanallah. That's a beautiful thing to do. However, and there was no one denying that, min ghayri nakirin, without any denial, except illa an yushawwisha jahruhum bidhikri ala na'imin aw musallin aw qari'i Qur'ani. Except only when this becomes a concern for someone sleeping or reciting or praying. In these three situations, when this dhikr jahr becomes a concern, a difficulty, a harm, a trouble for somebody else, then this dhikr, all this is a beautiful thing to do, but then this dhikr of Allah must stop and becomes wajib to stop. I hope you're understanding by this up to now. And similarly, another masala, another issue mentioned in the same sixth jild of Fatawa al-Zashi, page 233, Al-Hazrat asked a similar question, and he said that no dhikr should be read with loud voice when it can potentially become distraction for someone who's praying or sick or is sick. Yani, when someone is praying or sick, he's in namaz or he's a marid, you might actually cause any harm to them. So you must not do dhikr loudly. I mean, whether recitation of Quran or dhikr of Allah or any other dhikr, you shouldn't do that. if any such harm is out of question, there is no such thing that is possible in that situation, only then the dhikr is jaiz. He still uses the word jaiz. Jaiz means that it is permissible to do, but not necessary, not wajib. You shouldn't. There's there's no need to do that definitely. But if someone wants to do that, then we need to reassure and make sure that there is no harm to anybody in the surrounding, in the vicinity. So, however, he still mentions, however, ikhfa is still best, even though it's jaiz. But dhikr khafi, he says, is still afdal, subhanAllah. Because the Hadith Mubarakah mentions that khayru dhikri khafiyun, that best or akhfa, khayru dhikri akhfa, the best of dhikr is the quietest. That's the Hadith Sharif he mentions. The Hadith Mubarakah mentioned that the best of the dhikr is the quietest. Now, obviously, all of us want to do the best form of the dhikr, especially after namaz. Especially after namaz, when akhfa dhikri khafi is the best of the dhikr, then why not do that straight after the fardh? Which is the best basically mawqa, best occasion to perform that dhikr. You should do dhikr khafi, subhanAllah. So that you can act upon many ahadith, not only one hadith, many different hadiths. One hadith one masla you're acting upon is not distracting a Muslim brother. Another masla you're acting upon is doing dhikr, subhanAllah, you're getting the reward of that. Third hadith you're acting upon is doing dhikr khafi, getting the reward of the best form of dhikr. So all three, you're gathering many barakat, subhanAllah. That is how you getting more closer to Almighty Allah. And then he mentions, in this fatwa, that in faraid, when there are sunan straight after faraid, that's additional masla. So up to here we understood that dhikr khafi is the best form of dhikr. And dhikr itself is a great thing to do. Alhamdulillah, we all believe in that. But however, we must not distract the namazi, musalliyin, the one who's reading namaz, because that's not allowed. It is a sinful thing to do that, and we must avoid that. And it is wajib for us to stop that dhikr when that is doing that. So when someone is reading namaz, you must stop there. So, and another thing is that when there's sunan after that, after the fara'id, then the gap between the fard and sunnah, even the slightest of the gap is disliked. Makruh, however, is makruh tanzihi. I repeatedly say that it's makruh tanzihi, any minor dislike. It's not that something which we can raise objection on. If someone is doing that slightest of the gap, or maybe slightly longer gap, they sit down and read their adhkar, doesn't matter. They might do that, but it is simply reducing the reward of the sunnah. And if the sunnah, as mentioned, delaying sunnah becomes reason for the decrease in the reward, at his delay from the masnoon time, the time that was established by sunnah. So it is masnoon to stand for the sunnah straight after the fard. But if someone did sunnah after dua or any other wadifa, then that means that masnoon time, they will miss that masnoon time. But sunnah will still be established. When you perform sunnah, he will still get the reward of sunnah, obviously. But that the extra sunnah that he had to act upon by standing straight away for the sunnah, he will miss that sunnah. He's still getting the reward of performing the four whatever the number of rak'at sunnah he does that. He will get reward of that. But he will miss the reward of that small sunnah in between, that standing up straight away, that's also sunnah, subhanAllah. And however, sometimes people might raise an objection here. And they might say that actually Sarkar Islam used to read sunnah at home. Sarkar Islam के घर में पढ़ते थे, तो उसमें क्या वक्फा नहीं आता? यानी यहाँ से आप उठ के जा रहे हैं, you read namaz, fardh, and all the Sarkar's house was right there at the end of maybe the other wall that we have in that next room. Sarkar would stand up and go and read Sunnah Mubarak at the house. That's how they would do that throughout their life, in Madani life at least. For majority of the years, they would do that. Sometimes they would sit as well, but majority of the time they would go. So someone can say that सुन्नतें तो घर में पढ़नी अफजल हैं, तो फिर इधर वक्फा, मैंने सुनी भी शायद बात की किसी से इसी मसले के बाद किसी ने वहाँ से भी हिंट दी है इनको. उसका जवाब ये दिया हुआ कि it's mentioned Khilafah Shamiyya that when you say that afdal, someone might say that afdal is reading sunnah at home, then this cannot be raised here. You can't raise this as an objection here, because when you stand up, Sarkar's action of standing up and going towards the house, even that was sunnah, subhanallah. Sarkar jab uthte the, तो घर को तशरीफ ले जाते थे, तो सरकार का वो एक्शन भी सुनना है सुभान। The time that you're spending in the, even if your house is maybe 10 minutes away from here, you're traveling on the car, but because you're doing all this journey with the intention of performing a sunnat, so you're still getting the reward of that. This sunnah, Allama Shami specifies that it isn't disliked, yani it is not mania in the reward of that performing that sunnah. Therefore, this special objection is not needed here. It cannot be raised in this. One might also have a question arising in the mind, and that's raised by some of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah as well. Although this was meant to be our daleel, yani our proof for doing dhikr bil jahr. When someone asks us whether dhikr bil jahr is established, we might present this narration of Hazrat Abdullah ibn Abbas, this one that you can see on your screen now. We could present this. However, this does not establish the dhikr of La ilaha illallah the way we do that. Abdullah ibn Abbas says that I was very young and I would not be attending the prayers in those days. And I would learn that when they would raise the voices with the dhikr, I would learn that the namaz has finished now. And as soon as they would finish the fardh, I could hear them raising voices with the dhikr, subhanAllah. That was in the times of Aqal Islam. So why is it that is sunnah, obviously establishes a sunnah that Sarkar Shah used to do dhikr straight after namaz? So we should be doing that as well. Obviously sunnah and sunnah, they establish sunnah. So the hadith Pak establishes that. So ulama say that the purpose is that this hadith Mubarak establishes the sunnah of doing dhikr, but it does not specify which dhikr was done. And this is mentioned by many muhaddiseen, not me. It's been mentioned by many muhaddiseen, the Shari, Bukhari, and because it's mentioned in Muslim Sharif and Mishkat Sharif as well. Those who did Sharh of Mishkat Sharif, Ash'atul Lam'at, Hazrat Shaykh Abdul Muhaddis Deelwi, even he mentions that this hadith Pak does not specify the dhikr that was done. Some hadith, another narration is here, down there. It mentions takbir. He say, I would learn about the finishing of the namaz when I would hear the voice of takbir. So that was one way of doing dhikr. One way of doing dhikr that mentions here is La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. There are many narrations now, many ahadith. One mentions the Sarkar Shah used to do dhikr. One mentions that I would hear La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu. This fourth kalima. Or I would hear the takbir. All these, they indicate that there was some dhikr done straight after the namaz was finished. But this does not establish the dhikr that's done now. However, also I mention here that when we learn that Sahaba Ikram used to do dhikr straight after namaz, then we also need to understand that they were the best people. They were the best people who ever walked on the earth. And they were the people who would come for namaz and they would sit down for many hours in the masjid waiting for the namaz. They were not like us who would, after every namaz, they would simply run away for another taxi job and then come back and do namaz again. They were not like that. They would be waiting in the masjid and there was no one who would be left after namaz. Ulama have specified that the only person I mentioned, there will be no masbooq or left behind in the prayers. So the only people who would be left behind, I said, is mentioned in Hadith Mubaraka, Shuruhat of Hadith. The only people who would be left behind would be munafiqeen. The munafiq would be left behind. Everybody else, the actual Sahaba Kiram who had Iman in them, strength of Iman, they would be sitting there waiting for the namaz much before the time of the namaz, subhanAllah. So therefore there was no masbooq there in those days. Muftiyani Kiram, Ulama Kiram, Ulama of Hadith and Tafsir, they mentioned this in detail, that there would be no masbooq. So there was the issue that we are mentioning here, of not doing dhikr so that we shouldn't be distracting the masbooq, the ones who have still some prayers, rak'at left, and they have to finish off straight after Fardh Namaz. We should not distract them. That masla was not found there because there was no masbooq at all. Throughout the life of Pakistan, there was no masbooq. Nobody who would miss any rakat of the namaz and who would have stand up for. So even if they did this zikr, the way we do now, they didn't do that because they would do simply Allahu Akbar. Or if 100,000 people in the Masjid Nabawi Sharif, they do Allahu Akbar together, that's a loud voice. And Hazrat Ibn Abbas can hear that in the house, subhanAllah. But even if they do zikr the way we do, 3 times La ilaha illallah, they will do that. But even if they did that, even then there would be no masbooq, there was no distraction. But I will come to that this zikr wasn't done in those times. And why is it that we can't do that zikr? Because there are other reasons. I'll mention that later. So there was no such need of doing dhikr in a muted voice there because there was no need. There was no such need. So if someone raises this objection that there is Hadith Pak which mentions that Hazrat Abbas say that yes, there was dhikr done in the time of Pakistan, thus we accept that. That's one of our proofs that we give in the evidence of doing dhikr bil jahr, subhanAllah. But that does not establish the dhikr of La ilaha illallah first. Also, it does not establish that there were any masbooq, any namazi who still had any prayers rak'at left, so they were distracted and this was allowed by Aqal Islam. That was not the case, okay? We need to understand that. And so I mentioned that with the chain of time, when we finish namaz now, obviously we see a couple of rows every day, especially in the evening prayers, in Maghrib and Isha. We see a couple of rows, people who would come slightly late and they would have a few rakats left, and that happens regularly now. In bigger masajid, there will be much greater number of rows of people who still have to make up their missed rakat. So that's the case within our time now. Times have changed now. So if we start doing dhikr, all the imam and muqtadi with a loudspeaker now, we have this thing as well now. If we start doing dhikr in this loudspeaker and the way we do it that now, mashallah, in a very beautiful manner, that will definitely be distracting all of the people. So now we are facing a dilemma now. One is that the dhikr is sunnah, subhanAllah. Dhikr, aako jo cheez? Sunnah, subhanAllah. But also we just learned in detail that distracting that namazi is also not distracting namazi is wajib. Sunnah and wajib is much greater than sunnah. Sunnah is also highly important, but wajib is even greater. Emphasis has to be placed on that. So zikr is sunnah, we must do that. But also not distracting the namazi is also wajib. So how do we join the both? We can join the both, I mentioned earlier, by acting upon another beautiful hadith of dhikr khafi, subhanAllah. Do dhikr khafi in a very muted voice, and also act upon the sunnah of standing up straight for the namaz, sunnah after the fard, and you can join all the hadiths, or you can get greater barakat, subhanAllah. And you will act upon sunnah as well, you will act upon wajib as well, and you will act upon many sunnahs in that, subhanAllah. So you gain much more reward. That's why I mentioned it is afdal or finest form of dhikr. Do dhikr khafi, and you can get reward of sunnah and acting upon wajib, and also you will get reward of not distracting the ones who are praying. Alright, I hope you're understanding. And I've mentioned here, another question sometimes raised about the du'as, the du'a that we do straight after faraid. The question of that also is addressed in this fatwa. And so I mentioned that the fifth issue cited above. They mentioned that there must not be a greater amount of gap in the raka'at straight after the sunnah, fard and sunnah. There must not be the gap, especially when you have sunnah after the fard. When there is no sunnah in fajr and asr, then you can sit down and do dhikr as long as you want it. But if there is sunnah, that you have sunnah muakkada and other like witr and other nawafil you have to do, then there shouldn't be any gap that we learned from the Masail so far. So therefore, the dua that we need to do, that's mentioned in the Hadith Sharif, is just this bit. Allahumma anta salam anta salam, tabarak ya dhal jalali wal ikram. I mentioned this the other day as well. And that dua does not have to be read with your hands up like this. You can, and Hadith Sharif and many muhaddithin mufassirin kiram, muhaddithin kiram, they have mentioned, Fatawa Shamiyya, they specified that it doesn't mean that Aqas used to do this dua all the time. There's nothing in the Hadith which establishes that Aqas used to read this dua every time, or it was exactly this dua that was read, or they would simply wait for this amount of the time in which this could be read. Only that short moment they would sit on the Musalla Sharif and they would slightly turn right. You might have seen me doing that as well. They would turn right slightly and toward the Musalliyin, and they would just wait for this brief moment where you could read either a couple of kalimat astaghfirullah 3 times, or they could read this dua, Allahumma anta salam anta salam, tabarak ya dhal jalali wal ikram, this much, and they will stand up for the sunnah straight away. So therefore, one can easily fulfill all of that by simply doing a short dua, which is afdal. And because long dua is makruh, so you can simply do istighfar 3 times, or kalima sharif 3 times, and a very short dua, as mentioned in this sharif, this one. And you should do that in a very low voice, not in a loud voice, just to fulfill the sunnah. And after finishing sunnah, one can do tasbihat and all other adhkar, as they mentioned. And this has been specified in Fatawa Shamiyya, that all the hadiths that relate any dhikr, any dua, any kalma sharif, or any specific dua, wazifa, that was read by Aqal Islam, all of them, they are referring to the wadhaif after the sunnah and after the finishing of the prayer. If you want to learn the Arabic, just to get the barakat, I'll read that. He says, مَا وَرَدَ مِنْ حَدِيثِ فِي الْأَذْكَارِ عَقِيبَ الصَّلَاةِ. عَقِيبَ الصَّلَاةِ means after the prayer. And فَلَا دَلَالَةَ فِي الْإِتْيَانِ بِهَا قَبْلَ السُّنَّةِ. There is nothing in that would prove doing such a thing before sunnah. بَلْ يَحْمِلُ الْإِتْيَانِ بِهَا بَعْدَهَا. But that actually establishes doing all those du'as after the sunnah. Subhanallah. Subhanallah. Because sunnah, he said, sunnah is min lawahiq al-fariḍa wa taghabiha wa mukammilatiha. That sunnah is actually, Hadith Mubarak also mentions, that sunnah is attached to fard. And it is from something that completes the fara'id. Sunnah completes your fard. Sometimes you might have a couple of things missing in the fard. If you perform sunnah, that reward is also completed. Subhanallah. So sunnah completes your fard. He says, because sunnah is from the completing. Let me see if I have translated that in the next bit. I might have. No, I haven't. I just left that to the Arabic or the ulama. He mentioned that the sunnah is from the lawahiq fariḍa, and mukammilat has something that completes the fara'id. It's not different from the fara'id. فَلَمْ تَكُنْ أَجْنَبِيَّةً عَنْهَا. It's not different from the fara'id. مَا يَفْعَلُ بَعْدَهَا يُطْلَقُ عَلَيْهِ أَنَّهُ عَقِيبَ الْفَرِيضَةِ. So everything that's done after the sunnah, that we can say that was done after the fard. So if Hadith Mubarak mentioned the Sarkar used to do this straight after fard, that actually means that they used to do that after the sunnah actually. Because sunnah is also attached to fard. So sunnah is completion of the fard, and there is no difference in the sunnah and fard when it comes to the prayer of Aqal Islam. So when Hadith mentioned the Sarkar used to do this and that after fard, either this dua or that dua or dhikr, all of that can actually mean that this was done after the sunnah. Subhanallah. इस हस्ते मैं उम्मीद है कि और गल मेरी बड़ी वाज़ेह होकर समझ आ गई, उस पर कोई इबहम नहीं रहा. अगर कोई इबहम है भी, it's only created. And मैं गला आप को नहीं की थी. Again, and let me clarify this. All of these things, I haven't mentioned this with my own, you can say, thought. I've given you extensive references in that, ताकि तुहानू पूरी गल समझ आवे. और ये सारी फतावा रज़ीशी भी बड़ी इस्तलमी बहस है, लेकिन तुहाड़े तो ज़ाहिर बहस बड़ी मुश्किल उसे अंडरस्टैंड करनी. मैं बड़ी सिंपल गल आसान अंदाज में समझाइए. कोई पूरा कि असी आखिर लिखे में थे कि brothers who avoid dhikr after salah due to reason cited herewith should be appreciated and encouraged and must not cause any doubt on the action which is based upon sunnah. यानी अगर कोई नमाज किसी मशवरे तो ही जानते हो कि इतने माशाल्लाह आंदे हो अस जिक्र ना कर दे इस वक्त तुम्हारे ज़हन में कोई ऐसे सवाल नहीं आना चाहिए कि ये क्यों जिक्र नहीं कर रहे, ये क्यों बाबियों को चावल तो नहीं खा रहे, ऐसी कोई गल ज़हन में ना एक होता है ना साढ़े सुनिया में चीज़ होती है ना कि विदाउट गल समझे बगैर वो आग छोड़ देने की शायद एक ही गल नवे मौलवी सब नवा मसला कटा है ये गल ये मैं अर्ज करें कि इस पे बदगुमानी क्योंकि बस तो सारा समझ आ गया सुन्नत मुबारक तो साबित है हदीस तो साबित है और साढ़े बुजुर्गों की किताबें फतह बरदीन शरीफ तो बड़ा सुन्नी तो कोई नहीं थी सरकार आला तो बड़ा इस दौर में इस तरह साहिब रूहुल बयान सन बाकी सुनिया की किताब पढ़ियां ने इस मसले का ये अलग गल है कि स्टेज पे बयान नहीं हो रहा मशता में इस्तेमाल नहीं हो रहा लेकिन उलमा मुफ्तियान किराम ने वाज़ेह बयान किया है मेरे को सबूत है वीडियो ऑडियो सबूत है मेरे को इससे उसके अलावा ये मैं अर्ज किया है कि अगर कोई जिक्र करता भी है फॉर एग्जांपल even we did that for a long time and even now we will do that after Fajr and Asr when there is no namazi doing namaz behind we do that alhamdulillah and if you see someone doing that you go to other masajid they all Sunni masajid we love them all they do zikr after namaz there is no need to raise any objection as a muqtadi you don't need to point any fingers to them so don't make this a reason to start a new fitna in those masajid. You shouldn't do that. It's not for you to do. I, as an alim deen, because I have some ground to stand on, I can give all these citations, so I can explain that. If you go there and say that then you will be in deep waters after that. So it's best to avoid that. So one shouldn't be. You shouldn't have any ill thoughts about them, and you should always do husn zan I mentioned because they are also practicing upon deen. They have their love for the zikr mashallah and they have been taught this way throughout the history. The books are filled with fadail of zikr as well and we mention that all the time and ulama they do many great authentic established ulama they do the zikr because that's how it has been and it's only when makruh tahrim makruh tanzihi I said very small dislike that's attached to it. It's only decreasing the reward of the sunnah that's performed and you're missing one beautiful sunnah of doing sunnah straight away. That's why we emphasize that it's afdal to avoid that and also it's causing great distraction to the namazi. There's a wajib to stop when it causes distraction. Ulama haven't thought about this yet, they haven't acted upon that but they should also consider that and hopefully they will all act upon it. Some still do mashallah many masajid who are authentic ulama there as Aimma, Imam, they have established it already. So they don't do zikr because it becomes a reason for distraction of many of them. But if some still do, then our duty is not to think bad about it. We should still have husn zan that they do so because they think it's something rewarding. That's